Breaking up with a quality Christian girl was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. Back in 2017, I had this relationship where she was a nice girl. She treated me well. I felt valued. I felt supported. I wasn't incredibly attracted to her, somewhat, but the way the relationship was going was actually really good. And it kind of threw me off because prior to dating her, all I knew in relationships was chaos and drama, and this felt new. It was refreshing, but I also didn't know what to do with it because it was almost too comfortable and too safe. Now, I'm not telling you that comfort and safety are always a bad thing, but I was sitting in that space for many months, and something in the bottom of my soul was telling me something's not right here. And so this girl and I were even talking about marriage. She was pretty set on the idea that we were going to get married, and I was almost there. But still, something just told me, hold on, hold your horses, and don't rush this, because I had been guilty of rushing relationships in the past. So here she came along, and it completely changed what I was used to in relationships. But here are some of the mistakes I was making, and I didn't realize it until after. For one, I was hanging on to something just because I was treated well. Just because you meet someone and she's a Christian and she might go to your church and she values you, she adores you, it doesn't mean this is God's will for you two to get married. And that's why it's so important to always seek the kingdom. Whether it's your first date, whether you've been together for months, years, even after marriage, you need to always ask the Lord, what is your will for us? And so I didn't have the level of faith back then that I do now, but God was still giving me a nudge, telling me, you need to move on. And so the other big mistake I was making is I didn't want to hurt her feelings. Only once before that had I ever been the one to break up with someone. And I felt so terrible because when I gave my reasons for it, it just seemed to me like they weren't good reasons. I almost would have rathered something bad happened so I could at least make an easy decision to say this will never happen again, right? And so to be able to just break up with someone simply because I'm not feeling it anymore, I felt this burden on me like I was a horrible guy. And so you have to just make sure too that while as believers we care for those around us and we care for loved ones, sometimes the most loving thing you can do is actually knowing when to let go. And that was a difficult, painful lesson for me that God was trying to show me. I remember just being in tears when I was breaking up with this girl, and in my mind I'm thinking, I wish I could get over this, and I wish there was a better way and maybe a way to make it work. But it's something that you have to go through sometimes, because not knowing how to break up with someone can actually create soul ties that are not healthy. That's how my past marriage happened before I got divorced. I saw all the red flags. I didn't know how to break up with this woman. I didn't have the courage to do it because I didn't want to be single again. And then fast forward 7 years later, we were married, and then she ended up breaking up with me and calling it for a divorce. And so these are things that you have to be very careful about, and the idea of soul ties, right? And that's why also in 1 John chapter 4, verse 1, not believing every spirit you believe or you meet is so important, because even if you meet a quality woman, even if she goes to your church, even if she claims that Jesus Christ is Lord, it doesn't always even mean that she is sent from God. And it actually could come from the enemy too, because the enemy can give you false blessings. Now, do I think this girl was the one from Satan trying to throw me off? No, I don't think so. I think God was trying to show me a valuable lesson here. But another thing that got me caught up in that relationship for longer than it should have been is that I was afraid of being single again, because I knew if I cut the cord and how difficult it was to meet somebody in this day and age, I feared the idea of, okay, am I going to be single for another year or two or longer? And so again, that wasn't fair to her, because in my mind, I'm already thinking ahead and thinking about if I cut the cord, it's not going to be easy. But then I finally realized you've been on the flip side where you've been married. You've been on the flip side for past relationships going on for years longer than they should have, whereas this one was 6 months. So kind of comparing the two, it helped my decision. And then the final thing to remember also is sometimes when you meet someone, even if you're attracted to them, friendship is actually the intent and what really was God's will. And I believe looking back now that God allowed me to experience a situation where I was treated in a way that was loving and in a refreshing way, better than I had before. But perhaps God's will for us actually was friendship and not a relationship. And so it's easy to kind of mix up the two sometimes, especially when a woman's incredibly attractive. But you have to also, again, seek the kingdom first, and then all these things will be added on to you. I had been looking at dating as something to escape loneliness. And instead of seeking the Lord's will, I simply moved forward with this girl because she was kind of attractive, but I just didn't want to feel that loneliness anymore. And again, that's why it's so important to seek God's will first and always. Just because somebody's attractive and she's a believer, it doesn't mean God wants you to spend your time with her. And so I hope this was encouraging for you. This is something where being lonely sometimes isn't necessarily a bad thing, where waiting in singleness can actually be a healthy thing. And that's something I had to learn. And it's a guide I put together in the description below, because if you're there right now, check this out and it might help you through that season of waiting. And God bless.